Here in New York, it's time for Paul Rieckhoff, Paul, the host of the Independent Americans podcast. And the last time you were here, we were covering this as a breaking story. Remember, that was right after the shooting of Charlie Kirk. We've had so many conversations since then about what's going on in the country. Kash Patel back on Capitol Hill today on the House side was asked by Jerry Nadler, the Democrat from here in Manhattan, a number of questions about the environment, including this one.
Director Patel, do you agree that there is political violence from both the left and the right?
There's too much political violence.
Do you agree, yes or no, that there's violence?
There is too much political violence based on ideologies from either side.
So there at the end, he does say ideologies from either side. Thoughts?
That's a step forward. I think it's a very fragile and terrible moment in American history, and we need unity, we need cohesion, we need respect, we need the temperature brought down, but we also need our national security personnel, and especially our FBI, to identify the problem. They have to be united on what the target is, and the target is political violence, and the reality is it does come from many sides.
Yes.
That's a national security threat, it's a threat to our children, it's a threat to our political leaders. And I think now what we need to hear from especially the FBI director and the president is, what is our national security response? What are we going to change? How are we going to learn from this incident? 36 hours is a long time for this guy to be running around before the FBI eventually got him. What can we learn to protect other individuals, because political attacks are continuing to happen, and we haven't announced any significant strategic changes, budget changes to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, true. They did get him faster than, the Boston Met bomber and some others, Yeah,
but he also turned himself in. I mean, essentially turned himself in, and I think, look, I don't think anybody was sitting around going, oh, good, Kash Patel is in charge right now. I mean, there was a false notification that they had caught the guy. There was a question of whether or not he was up for this job. And I think this testimony this week underscored that he may not be up for this job, and you're hearing that from both parties.
I was going to say, a lot of that's coming
you're hearing
from
that from Republicans, right?
You are, yes.
And the most important thing he's got to do is keep us safe.
Now, we've been having all these conversations. I've been thinking a lot about it, about how, like, all of us generally, like, how everybody can get to, sometimes people say a better place, however you want to phrase it. I was going to bring this up, and I will with Geraldo next hour, but one of the things I was thinking about, I don't know if you agree or disagree, is like, if everybody looks at it, conservatives and liberals say, well, what can I do differently? What about if we just reevaluated the way we react to President Trump? In other words, on the liberal side, if people were to look at the president, because in the short term at least, I think this has a lot to do with, and say, not everything the guy says is necessarily a bad thing because he said it. Yeah, maybe he has a good idea on certain policy. Maybe something he said is actually funny, and you can laugh at it, and you're not going to lose your liberal card. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And whereas conservatives, the conversation, that's what Patel was getting at, and we've talked to a number of them this week, if you're going to talk about people, on the so-called radical left coming after you, you have to at least acknowledge that Trump is part, when you're talking about political rhetoric, of the problem and not necessarily interested in a solution. So if you just acknowledge those things, to me, we could at least have a conversation on both sides.
I think it's a moment where everybody in America can take some agency. You don't have to be reactive to everything. You can control your own sphere of influence. You just did it here on your show. You do it every day. You set a positive example. You bring a respectful tone. You're kind to your guests. You can do the same thing at your dinner table or at your place of work. It's not just about screaming at your TV and waiting for politicians to lead the way. This is a moment where we can control our own communities and control the way we treat others. And it's a moment for every American to step up and not just be a passenger on what feels like a crazy train running across America right now.
That's a good way of putting it. It's almost like you're saying you can be a leader yourself. You don't have to follow everybody just because, everybody's saying it. Oh, this is big on social media. Let's talk about it. Everybody's worked up. Everybody's angry about it. You don't have to do that.
And especially, I teach my boys this. I have two kids who are 10 and 6. You got to control your emotions. You have to recognize your leadership authority. You have to set an example for others. And I tell my older boy to set a good example for his younger brother. And I think each of us has to set an example for our children and all the children who are watching, because I think it's easy to let your tempers get the best of you and to duke it out and forget that our enemies are watching, and somebody like Putin is celebrating division in America, but children are watching, and they're looking to us not just for an example, but also for some stability, to know they're okay and to know they're safe.
That's a good point. I like the way you put it. Thank you, Paul, as always. One quick thought, maybe since we're here in New York, I know you always want to talk about the mayor's race because it's interesting. On the tablet, I'll bring up a four-way race. You had been, as an independent, supporting the independent candidate, Walden. He's out of the race now. These four are still in. And we know Mamdani has the big lead. And Marist, earlier in the week, they did a poll. Even if everybody got out and it was head-to-head, he's still up 10 against Cuomo. What do you make of this race? Mayor Mamdani in New York City is a foregone conclusion?
Well, right now it's Mamdani versus all the others, and the others have kind of agreed to mutually assured destruction. Because as long as all three of them stay in, Mamdani's going to win, and he may win anyway. The lead is real, but the question is, can you appeal to independents? There are a million of us here in New York City. Can you appeal to Republicans? There are Republicans in New York City, and moderate Democrats who are not happy with Mamdani. The only way I see that happening is if Adams and Sliwa drop out and they consolidate around Cuomo, which can happen, but important to note, I think they're printing ballots next week, and even if they do drop out, like Jim Walden do, their names may still be on the ballot.
Like Adams and Sliwa would be.
Which is an example of how our system's broken. Jim Walden wants his name off the ballot, and they're still keeping it on there. So that's bad for our democracy.
That becomes an issue in these races. Remember RFK, remember in the presidential race?
Same
that was
thing.
the issue, same type of
Yep.
thing. That's an interesting point. All right, Paul, thank you, as always.
Thank you, sir.
Paul Rykoff, our independent voice on these issues. Still ahead, the president's crime crackdown. It's headed now for Memphis. There's Paul's podcast, The Independent Americans. As we